Good morning. My name's Mark Potts. I'm going to be doing this together with Jack there, who's currently using the video camera, which makes me feel very self-conscious. There you go. Quite used to it by now, should be. Our presentation is about developing cultural empathy and living global citizenship. And what I want to talk to you about is really 3 transformations in learning that have taken place, certainly for myself, and I think also partly for Jack and for the other co-author of this paper, which is Stephen Coombs, Dr. Stephen Coombs, who's currently, luckily, in Fiji, running the University of South Pacific. And these transformations in learning begin, I think, with, certainly from a personal perspective, I was deputy head in a school in Salisbury, in Wiltshire, and Jack came along to our school to deliver some CPD. And it was through Jack from Bath University that I then developed, if you like, I suppose, a confidence as a researcher to be a practitioner, but at the same time to conduct academic research. So Jack introduced us to this notion of improving our educational practice and turning that into academic research. Using questions such as the ones noted here: how can I improve the delivery of citizenship education through an international school partnership? The questions based around this idea of how can I improve my practice in some particular way. And it was a transformation for me, and I know many of my colleagues as well, to recognise that we could actually make a contribution to the academy as practitioners. The second transformation was when I visited a school in South Africa. I was lucky enough to be part of a Teachers International Professional Development programme, which was funded by the government at the time, very generously.
This South African student.
And I'm not going to put the volume on this. And that was a second transformation for me, because it gave me the opportunity to I suppose, influence beyond my own school and to go international, if you like, and get involved with another school. It's a black township school in Durban, South Africa. And I established a partnership between my own school and the school in South Africa, which was sustained for 12 years. Now, so I'm just going to turn the volume down to put it right. Now, in terms of methodology, it was very much an action research approach. So as I was in South Africa, I was recognising that my values were not being lived out fully. There were things going on that I was seeing in the school, there were people I was talking to, such as this young man, Siyabonga, and there were things coming up for me, issues that I could not resolve. So it was recognising that my values were not being lived out fully. So therefore I made a plan. I gathered data, video, interviews with students, interviews with staff, interviews with members of the community. I analysed the data, and then I reflected on the findings. And what came out of that for me over a number of years of study was this notion of living citizenship, which we became quite excited about, because it seemed to be a sort of new idea that people hadn't developed. We heard about active citizenship, but living citizenship was something a little bit different. It certainly seemed different to me. So that then, after that came a third transformation really, and that was when we started considering this idea of living citizenship. I think initially, like many in education, I think, when we go and take part in an international partnership, there's very much a tendency to think, how can we help? How can we provide funds or resources for this other school? And it sort of threw me then to think, well, actually, is this the right way forward? The post-colonial perspective is very much that's not the way to go about things. The idea of this Western model of development that we know best, and let's impose that on schools in South Africa and so on, just doesn't seem to work. So it made me question this whole idea of caring and helping other schools that are if you like, less fortunate. So, looking for an alternative approach, then, we developed this idea of living global citizenship. I'd just like to perhaps illustrate that through a little video clip.
Hello, I'm Dr. Mark Potts, and I'm going to talk about living citizenship. This original idea of living citizenship emerged from my study of an educational partnership between my own school in Salisbury, the UK, and a black township school in Durban in South Africa. Living citizenship emphasises the importance of dialogue between the participants in forming educational partnerships. There is a need to negotiate values and discuss a way forward for the partnership based on agreed values. The dominant voice in the partnership should be that of the less powerful participants. This recognises the unequal power relations between participants. So, in the case of the partnership between the UK school and the South African school, it was important that the South African school had the predominant voice, because it's in a less powerful position in terms of economic resources than that of the UK school. Giving the South African school the dominant voice helps to redress the imbalance in power relations between a mainly white UK school and a black African school. The activities of the partnership are then agreed, and participants engaged in the activities need to regularly reflect on and develop those activities further, checking the aims and outcomes of the activities are consistent with the agreed values. The values themselves also need to be regularly reviewed as new participants become part of the partnership. Thus, there is a need for ongoing dialogue and reflection as the partnership expands across the communities. Some people call this a learning space, where intercultural conversations go on and new meanings and understandings emerge, such as living global citizenship. My understanding of living global citizenship, then, is that it gives representation to the stories of others. It provides a space for the narratives of others, especially the less powerful in a partnership. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so having talked this through with Dr. Stephen Coombs, he really developed this notion of cultural empathy, which again is, I think, quite an original notion. This idea that it's about appreciating and valuing other traditions and other cultures, and developing that as a skill and value within students is something we feel it would be extremely valuable. So this became something we thought we might be able to formulate into some sort of social or educational policy. So I guess, having been through 3 transformations in learning, I suppose what we're now seeking to do is to achieve a 4th transformation, which might be to influence policymakers, educational institutions, in terms of this notion of living global citizenship and developing the skills and the values behind it, and also cultural empathy. So we're talking about participants in projects, community partnerships, engaging in dialogue across cultures. We're talking about them exploring their values, okay, as part of that dialogue. We're talking about them learning from each other in terms of learning from similarity, but learning also from difference between the cultures and between the participants. And it's a process of critical reflection on those values. And through the partnership, through that dialogue, through that reflection, developing values which then underpin activities that drive the partnership forward. And then the ongoing process of reflection on those activities and the extent to which they reflect the values that underpin the partnership. Okay, so what we're talking about here is an alternative pedagogy, we think, for effective citizenship education. There's a lot of literature out there about citizenship education, but there's a lot of discussion also and debate about what is effective citizenship education. And we feel that this could be a way forward in terms of driving effective citizenship education. And also, we're concerned, of course, with the cultural aspect in terms of, again, this hierarchical approach. So we feel this is a way around that, the existing position of existing hierarchies in citizenship and cultural education. It ties in with a report recently conducted called Global Graduates into Global Leaders, very much economics based, which was a survey and various bits of research done into what is it employers are looking for. And two of the phrases they come up with are global mindset and cultural agility, which seem to fit very nicely with this notion we have called global etiquette. The idea of global etiquette being that students appreciate and understand the norms and behaviours of different cultures and different communities of people. So fitted nicely with this report that came out in terms of what is it employers are looking for. They are, we think, looking for global etiquette. Jack, I think we have about 5 minutes. Would you like to do a little bit on this?
Yeah, sure. Just to make a distinction between, for example, Nicola, as you were speaking, and what we've been doing, there is a distinction which drew my question about what's educational, because I think Steve, Mark and myself have been willing to see ourselves as educational researchers who are researching our own practice and accepting responsibility for living our values as fully as we can. So our texts are actually accounts of how we are trying to live the values. And Mark, with his doctorate, came up with this work that he was doing on the ground in Africa with the school in Salisbury. So I'll just make that point that it's a distinction between what I would say is the normal social science research, which a lot of education researchers carry out, and what I understand by educational research, where the researcher takes the responsibility for living the values that constitute what counts as educational. And why Mark's work has excited me, along with Steve's, is that they have brought in this notion of global citizenship, which in relation to your passion for international education, does seem to me to be something that if we learn how to hold ourselves accountable for doing what, if you like, Mark is actually doing, literally the world becomes a better place to be, because we're living the values of cultural empathy. We're trying to actually show how the less powerful are being encouraged to develop a voice from within, not only within their own context, but within the international context in which we're living. If ever you want to just follow this, I'll put the video of Mark onto actionresearch.net. You'll see at the top there are the BERA presentations, so Mark and Steve, my paper will be there, plus the video, and you'll be able to access this 5-minute clip of Nelson Mandela. And the reason that we think this is very important is Mandela is literally an icon in relation to what we understand by global citizenship. And you'll hear him talking about the African notion of Ubuntu. And when I was over in South Africa, I learnt a lot about this African way of being, which essentially, it doesn't translate well into English, I am because we are. But when Mandela is talking about the values which has informed his life, I think you'll see that he's been responsible for himself living these values, and that we've used this in a way to constitute what we're meaning by living global citizenship. Is that okay? Is that clear? Okay, yeah, thanks, Mark.
That's right. There were two other things you also mentioned.
Yeah, the cultural settings that you'll see in our paper that, I mean, there are about 10 or 12 countries that, including Thailand, South Africa, Canada, Brazil, the European countries, where I've actually tried to show...
We've got to stop.
Stop dead. But please do access that. Okay, okay, thank you.
Yes, any questions?
This is just an observation, please. My name's Jika and I'm a professor of nursing in Japan. Can you explain to me, when you use the language, it's the language thing, when you're recognising that your partners are less powerful than you. You're saying they are less powerful than you. Now, surely that's a very dodgy position in which to start a partnership from, where partnerships are supposed to be equal. So why?
I don't think I set out thinking that. I think it's something I thought about over time, and I guess I'm using the phrase in the sense of economics. Economic.
Okay.
I'm an economist, and I'm afraid I always think first thing comes to mind is economics, and I was very much thinking in terms of economics, in terms of resources, in terms of looking at the two schools, tremendous difference in terms of.
But could not the lesser school have a greater treasure of knowledge to bring to you that you're just bringing economics to?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I came to recognise that was only one way of looking at things.
Great.
Yeah. My question relates to that too.
Yes.
In terms of creating dialogue and referring to people, other schools and other nations as being less powerful, and therefore setting out the very hierarchy that you're wishing to dispel. I just think that possibly it's just a way of communicating it because, in each context, individuals in those school systems will lack power. In the English system, certainly, many of the teachers and pupils that you'll talk to will be in a less powerful situation than in the township in Durham. And so I think I love the packaging of the global citizenship, but that power dynamics are evident in both contexts, and that very separation actually creates the hierarchy we're trying to dispel, so that just possibly the way it's communicated could be rethought.
Quick observation. Your cultural empathic engagement model, what you've described there, you've gone for the large-scale global citizenship. That would be just as applicable to a macro thing, for instance, where you've got, I come from the policing background, where you've got a police project with young people, which are they're culturally different, and that respect and empathy agenda, if it was used there, you'd have your learning living situation where both sides would be more empathically aware of the different cultures within it. So it can be macro applied as well.
So it needn't necessarily be international or
no,
local.
It can be
no,
small.
Absolutely. It could be quite local, certainly. Yeah.
But sorry, just to play devil's advocate on that one statement, surely a global citizen is global. It doesn't matter if you're national anyway. You're either a global citizen or you're not. So you wouldn't have to split it down. Global citizenship is a sense of global. I'm a global citizen.
Yeah.
So macroing it down to the bottom thing doesn't remove the fact you're a global citizen.
No. But possibly you're thinking more on the cultural empathy.
I'd say more about with regard to identifying and accepting that there are cultural differences that need to be respected, particularly in a power balance. It's something that doesn't really happen with safe experience. So this would enter in another interesting element and dynamic of learning within that sort of partnership.
Partnerships within a country, between different communities, within
groups, different ages, different whatever.
I find this research very interesting, very interesting, because I used to be a teacher at international schools in Nigeria, and there you have more indigenous students enrolling in those schools, and it's actually Western education, but it's STEM global education, and so students really are learning more about the West, learning more about becoming Westerners, feeling like Westerners, living in a foreigner's bubble, and in their own country. They don't understand the culture, and so it has this impact on their identity, like she said. And so if we had this dialogue, where the local culture, like you said, has the main voice, to make a lot of difference in educating the students to be global citizens. So I find it really interesting.
I think that's quite an interesting point, and just made me think of my European schools as well, because one of the things they said they weren't good at doing was kind of integrating with the local community. So there seems to be a balance that needs to be struck between, you know, basically the international community maybe within or outside, and then the local kind of community as well.
Yeah.
And also I think I found the idea of the living global citizenship very interesting.
Yeah.
But it also really reminds me of other notions such as intercultural dialogue and intercultural competence.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've read Mike Byron's work.
No.
He's come up with this term intercultural citizenship now. So, and that's quite new at the moment. And
Right.
I think it echoes some of your work. So it might be something you want to look into.
Who's that?
Mike Byron.
It's interesting what you say about Nigeria, though. That's seems fairly typical of my experience, is that there's a big emphasis on Western values and Western culture.
That's what my PhD research is about.
Yeah.
Could I ask you about evidence?
Yeah.
In your, because obviously you've developed some terms like living citizenship and quite a number of different terminologies. Could I ask how you developed those terms and what evidence base they came from?
12 years of study of the partnership between Surrey Academy and South African School. Many hours of interviews, I can't remember how many hours now, video footage of interviews, various case studies that were done, videos with participants in the partnership, some of which were done at the time, some of which were when they visited South Africa, some of them which were done several years later to look at impact on them as people in terms of what they'd gone on to and what they'd done. It was mainly video based, and then analysis of that data using various methods. I've done a paper before actually on the methods that we use to analyse the data, the video data.
Could I just say there's a lot in your PhD as well?
Yeah.
You know, the PhD is on the web, and there's a lot on Mark's concern with evidence and how that is validated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask that lady next door to you?